Okay, welcome everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are. My name is Mario Sanchez, and I am part of the Sumo Learn team here at Sumo Logic. And today we're going to go through level 2 certification. So you've learned the quick start. You learned level 1, which is a lot of showing you how to do, what are the things that you can do in Sumo. And what we're going to do this time around is we're going to dive a little bit deeper. I'm going to start showing you a few more operators that dig a little bit deeper into how you can start analyzing your data. A couple of things, as you notice, you're all on mute, and that's just to avoid distractions. But if you have any questions, just shoot them through the chat. I'll be trying to monitor that as I go. But also, we will have time at the end to do a little bit of Q&A as well. So we're going to focus on this level 2 certification. And the way that I'm going to do this is I'm going to start with the big picture, sort of how do I use a logs and metrics solution in Sumo? How do I monitor and troubleshoot? In our case, most of you are probably using logs, but how can you use metrics as well in this world? And then we're going to talk about a little bit of review of the basic tool set, but then we're going to dive into the advanced analytics. What else can I do? And then we'll talk about how do I monitor my trends? How can I use dashboards to monitor trends, to understand outliers, and to identify all those critical events that are important in your organization? And remember that the idea behind this is also to get you certified. So part of this webinar goes hand in hand with some hands-on exercises, which I will show you exactly where to find these. You have access to a training instance by going into service.sumologic.com and using this username and password. I'll show you in a second. All this information is written down for you on those hands-on labs. Just remember that this is available for you, for anybody else who wants to take them. There's no cost for you to try these labs. And this is what prepares you for the certification, for you to be able to go with to take the exam itself. Just to make sure that we all understand, let me show you exactly where to find this. So I'm going to go here into let's see, that said it was muted, but I guess you guys can hear me. Yes. Okay. So let me show you where that is done. So if you go here to a training instance like this one, or to your instance as well. You normally have seen the home tab in your own instance. Well, there's a learn tab, which we'll talk a little bit more about. There's videos here that are pretty useful for you. But there's also the certification tab. And if you see this one, this is exactly where you can take the exam from. Let me make this a little bit bigger so you guys can see it. This is where you would go about taking the exam. Well, for each one of these levels, there is also some information on how to prep for this. So in this case, we're doing level 2. This webinar that you're attending right now is one of the ways to prep, but the other way is with this hands-on labs. As a matter of fact, let me click on it and open it. And a lot of the instruction that I will be delivering today will be based out of this hands-on labs themselves. But just keep in mind that you've got the username and password and all that information and how to log in here. And I'm going to be using these labs to show you how to go about using Sumo in a more advanced way to analyze your data. All right. So with that said, let's do a quick review of the basics. Again, this should all be a little bit of a review for you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to run through a demo. I'm going to do a quick demo to how to monitor and troubleshoot in Sumo. And I'm going to break it into 3 areas. The first one is I'm going to get an alert that notifies me of some critical event. That alert is going to point me to look at some metrics. In this case, I'm going to start identifying the what. What is happening in my environment? I still don't know why, but I will have a good idea of what is happening. And then I'm going to dive into the relevant logs. And the logs, as you all know, are can tell us why something is going on. So with that said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here and show you a demo. And I'm going to be using this fake company here called Travelogic. And Travelogic, like any booking site that is out there, allows you to book flight. It allows you to book hotel. It allows you to book hire a car. And once you put all those in your cars, then you're able to pay, right? Travelogic is a modern app, just like many of your modern apps. You guys are supporting tools that or apps that have numerous tools in the background. You have microservices, you have containers, you have Kubernetes, you have databases. So all these different components. How do you keep an eye on all these components using Sumo Logic, and that's exactly what I want to show you. So we've got this site, Travelogic, and what I want to show you is what kind of dashboard I could put in place to keep an eye on my environment. Let me just refresh this to show you. But here it is. Here's my operational overview dashboard for Travelogic. Notice also that I have some alerts that are going onto my Slack channel. So I'm seeing a lot of reds. On a normal day, I would see a lot of green. But given that there's some stuff going on, I see some reds, I would have already gotten a Slack message in my Travel Ops channel. So there are ways for you to alert yourself as well on this kind of stuff. But for now, let's keep it simple. Let's say that I'm looking at this dashboard. It's up on my operations center. I start seeing a lot of reds, and I'm starting to get a little bit worried. Like, what's going on in here? And you notice this operational overview. We call it an overview because it's giving you information of a lot of different components in your environment. Here's a panel showing me my reporting nodes. These two middle ones are talking about my load balancer responses and 500s in my load balancer. My VPC network regex is shown here on the right-hand side. My product service, database issues is shown right here. In my case, this is an AWS environment. So this is my RDS information that is coming here into the database. Checkout service, I seem to be having a lot of issues there. So my point is, I'm looking at a lot of different data sources, a lot of these components. I'm having a big picture, an overview of those. And if any of these look red, let's take this checkout one, for example. If any of these look red, I can dive in a little bit deeper by clicking on that panel and getting a little bit more information about what's going on. So in this case, I can see here that I have these this services detail environment. And let's go through this. So remember that travel site that I was showing you before, right? Travelogic. So what people do here is they book travel, they book hotels, they book flights. Notice what I have here. I have a dashboard called bookings. And what this is showing me is that for the most part, people have been able to successfully book travel on my site. So that green area that you see there is successful bookings over a period of time. And it looks like I was having a few failed bookings, but then all of a sudden, sometime around maybe about 10 minutes ago, I started having a drop. If you notice in here, I have a big drop in my successful bookings, but instead in this orange one, I have a spike in my failed bookings. So something is going on in my environment. I still don't know what, but the metrics, I still don't know why, but the metrics are telling me the what. And the what is that I'm having failures in my bookings and a drop in my success, right? Let's take a peek at a few other things that are in here. This is showing me errors in my logs for the last 7 days. So what it's doing in here is it's taking an hour's worth of time, and it's looking to see if I had those errors today, if I had those errors a day ago, 2 days ago, 3 days ago, 4 days ago, and you get the picture. What it's really doing is it's trying to identify, is this some process that kicks off at 1 p.m. Every day, and therefore we have a lot of errors at that same time? And the answer is no. If I look at this line, this orange line, which is the errors for today, I don't see a blue line or a green line or a pink line because they're all hidden under this red line, meaning that normally at this same time of the day for the last 7 days, I don't see those errors, but today I'm seeing some errors. So this is an anomaly, right? I've identified that this is something that is really only happening today. Something similar is this gateway latency. Let's just pop it open a little bit. This is showing me that for the last, I don't know, hour and a half or so, things were okay. But then all of a sudden, again, around 1 p.m., by the way, I'm in US Eastern time, so that's why you see that time. But around 1 p.m., I started having a spike in terms of my gateway latency. Again, I still don't know why, but I'm starting to use these metrics and starting to identify that something is going on. Here's another way to view that. Look at this gateway latency delta. It's showing me the delta between one data point and the other. So visually, it's pretty easy to spot that there is certainly an outlier going on in there. The one over here on the right-hand side is an interesting one. Let me make this one a little bit bigger. This one is showing me errors by node. And if I look at this node, if I hover over here, you see that this is for prod 01 travel checkout node. and I have about 364 errors in the last 60 minutes. That's what this is telling me here, right? The last 60 minutes, I had about 364 errors. Here's another node that I had around 350 errors, and it's also a travel checkout node. So clearly, I'm having some issues with my travel checkout nodes. If I look at these other ones, which are my travel worker nodes, those are not having that many errors. There's a couple of errors here, a couple of errors here, but I'm starting to identify. I went from identifying that I was having some booking issues, my metrics, to knowing that my travel checkout nodes are the ones that are causing errors. Let's look at this one on the right-hand side. Let me make this a little bit bigger. This is showing me CPU and total memory. So again, some metrics around my host servers. It looks like, again, around 1 o'clock, I have this big spike in CPU. And if you look at that little bubble that says 61, it looks like it's my travel checkout node, again, the one having that issue, right? So I'm starting to identify that something is going on with my travel checkout nodes, whereas the other nodes, if you look at these ones here, it seems like everything is okay. They continue to be okay. I'm just highlighting a few of these other lines in here so that you can see that those just seem to be okay. However, my travel checkout node spikes. Let's do something here. I want to show you how you can dive into a panel. So if you're looking at a dashboard, you can click on this little icon, and it's going to dive into the panel behind it. So let's take a peek at this. This one here is showing me it's showing me right there the spike in CPU. By the way, the dotted line that you see here is memory. Memory seems to be okay all throughout. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here, and this is the memory metric. I'm just going to toggle it off by clicking on it. So that way my graph is a little bit cleaner, and I can focus on what really matters in here. So I'm using metrics to identify that CPU spikes in my travel checkout nodes. What you see up here, by the way, this little thing in here is the number of the log messages that I have had at that time. Let me get rid of this for a second, just show you what's going on in here. What I'm requesting is I'm saying, listen, give me all messages that have source category. Don't worry about this too much. We'll talk about it in a little bit. Essentially, source category is a way of tagging a message, and every single message has at least 5 tags, and source category is one of them. So all I'm saying is find all the messages that have been tagged prod01 travel checkout. And if you notice, these are all the messages that have come up. So the darker the square, the more messages you have in there. The lighter the square, the less messages you have at that time. Let's do something more interesting. I know that the issue is with travel checkout. So I'm going to do say prod01 travel checkout. And I'm going to focus on that one only and look at those logs because I know the travel checkout is the one that is giving me issues. And there you go. Here is the list. Here's the a show of messages that I've seen at that time. But even more interesting, why don't we look for keywords? Let's look for the word error. Let's look only for those messages in my logs that have the word error in it. And if I run that query, you now see, by the way, ignore this stuff at the front. This is a demo that is made to repeat on an hourly basis. So that's why you're seeing these errors repeat from the previous demo. But if you look over here, what you see is that right at the same time where I have that CPU spike, I also happen to have a lot of logs with the word error in it. So that's great. All I have to do now is go click on any of these little boxes. I will get all the log messages, all the error messages are listed here, and I can now sift through these log messages and find out why I was having some of those issues. So let's take an example. Let's look at this one that says number 4 here. This one says there's an error, SSL routines, SSL get certificate, certificate verify failed. Here's another one saying access denied. Here's another SSL get certificate failure. I mean, these are a lot of log messages to go through, right? So instead of sifting them and eyeballing them, what I want to do is I'm going to show you a new tool. I'm going to shift click on this message. And the reason I'm going to do that is because when you shift click, instead of just listing the messages, it opens up this other screen where you can do a lot of analytics on your log messages. And by the way, by the end of today, you will know how to do a lot of this stuff in here. You probably do already since you are level 1 certified. So what I'm doing is I'm looking right now at about 268 messages, right? Because I clicked on the little square that had 268 messages. But as we all know, whatever caused the error, it's probably not going to have the word error in it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to check, I'm going to broaden my query. I'm going to look for everything that has prod 01 travel checkout. Not only that, but I'm even going to broaden the time range. Instead of just looking for the last minutes or that kind of stuff, I'm going to look for the last 60 minutes. So let's do this. Let's look for the last 45 minutes, since I know that something happened in the last 30 or 45 minutes to cause these errors. So now I've broadened my search. I'm looking for 45 minutes worth of data for everything that has to do with the word checkout. And in reality, now I'm getting 45,000 messages. So right about now is when people start asking me, hey, Mario, hold on a second. You had narrowed it down to 260 messages. Why would you want to broaden it? The reason behind that is because I want to find out what the actual cause of the error is. I want to cast a wide net so that the message that caused the error is contained in my search. What I'm going to do now is, look at this. I have 1,800 pages worth of messages, but I'm going to hit this LogReduce button in here. And what that LogReduce button is doing right now is it's grabbing all those pages and pages and pages of messages. I think there were like 50,000 messages. And it's looking through all of them, and it's coming back and it's saying, okay, there are some messages that are so similar one to another that I'm going to categorize them into a signature. So if you look at this, that's exactly what it's doing right now. Let's look at this first line. It's saying that there are about 5,000 messages, or 6,000 now, or 7,000, that all look the same. They all have ASC time, a date, a level, info, name, checkout, function. Okay, so what this means, this star here means that maybe the function name is different for each one of them, but everything else is so similar. Of course, the transaction ID might be different, perhaps the line number might be different, but everything else is so similar that it collapsed it into a signature. And what that allows me to do is, it allows me to not have to sift through 7,000 messages worth of the same. Same thing here with this number 2, 6,000 messages that all look similar, and there you go. Remember that SSL routine certificate verify failed that we were seeing before? There's about 1,000 messages. So there's 1,000 messages I don't have to review one by one. And what you see now is that it looked at the same 40,000 messages, but I only have one page worth of signatures to sift through. More often than not, whatever caused the error is something that only happens once or twice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reverse the count. I'm going to look for those things that only happened a few times. And wow, look at this. The first one that shows up, this thing that only happened twice, is saying Travelogic app starting. So it's starting my cluster something checkout. And it's telling me that it's starting version 1.14.dev. So this is telling for me. I'm the ops guy, and it's showing me that someone deployed development code in my production environment. So this development code has the wrong SSL certificate, which is probably causing the backup, which is causing the CPU to shoot up, and it's causing my bookings. So what you saw me do here is I went from getting alerted or looking at a dashboard, diving into the metrics, identifying the what is going on in my environment, looking at the relevant logs, and identifying why something is happening. And when you find the why, you can see why those metrics are showing that kind of information. Now, just to close the circle, if this was a concern for me, if deploying development code is a concern, what I could do in the future is I could, let me just show you what I could do is in my operational overview dashboard that I showed you here before, I could do the following. I could create a panel like this one that is showing me This might be a little too small for you to see, but this is showing me all the deployed versions that are going in here. And if you notice, this is a demo environment, so you're seeing dev, 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 dev here. In reality, this should say prod, 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 prod. And I could even have an alert that says, if I ever see a version that says something, something .dev, then I should trigger an alert for that so that I don't have this kind of issues happening again. Okay, so this gives you an overview and an idea of how you can monitor and how you can troubleshoot using your logs and metrics. Obviously, your use cases are different to this, but this gives you a good sense of what you can do in your environment as well, right? Okay, and by the way, if you have any questions, like I said, just feel free to send it through the chat, or you can wait till the end, whichever makes sense for you. So very quickly, since you probably covered this in level 1, data flow is broken into 3 areas. We collect data through collectors and sources. That data comes into Sumo, and you can start searching and analyzing it using operators, using charts, and then eventually you can use dashboards, you can use alerts, so you can start visualizing and monitoring that data. We're going to focus mainly on number 2. You've seen a lot of number 3, so I won't spend too much time on that. But we are assuming that you've already collected your data. If you don't know how to collect your data, there is another webinar that focuses specifically on data collection for you. Having said that, you can send just about any data to Sumo. We could do cloud-to-cloud integration. We can grab data from local hosts. You can use a centralized infrastructure if you wanted to. Like in this case, we have all these different environments sending remote files over to this collector, or like if you have network devices like firewalls, they can send that data over to a centralized location, which can send it on to Sumo Logic. So just keep in mind that we can collect just about anything that is out there. Like I mentioned before, every single message that comes into Sumo gets tagged with the 5 metadata tags. The important one is this one called source category, because it can be configured freely. We cover best practices in that collector or data collection webinar, but at least here you will see some good examples on how to use that. So hopefully this is a review for you that all data uses source category. So with that in mind, what I want to do is I want to do a quick review of how to search your data, how to start parsing your data, and how to start providing structure to your data. So as most of you know, 98% of your queries should be using metadata. And by metadata, what I mean is the ability to, let me just see, I'm going to open a new query here and say, here is my metadata. So I'm going to use source category. So for example, in our case, we have some data called source category lab Apache access. So I'm going to search for Apache access data. What if I wanted only Apache access data that had the word Mozilla in it? Pretty easy. I can say and Mozilla, Mozilla. And that would search only those with the word Mozilla in it. As you see here, they've been highlighted in my messages as well. You should know already how to use this time picker. So you could choose last 60 minutes. If there's something that is not in there, like let's say last 45 minutes, you can do -45M, and it's as simple as that. And also, if you, oh, it sounds like there was some banging on the microphone. Okay, so hopefully that should be better there. Let's see, give me just 1 second to triple check something here and make sure that you have the best output. Yeah, okay, so output should be good. Good. Okay, so then let's try that. Thank you for the feedback. That hopefully this should sound a lot better. Okay, and so the other thing that you can use is custom. If you want to choose, let's say October 1st through October 3rd at 2 a.m. to 12 p.m., you could do that as well. So you can choose very specific time frames in here. But for now, let's keep it simple. Let's use last 60 minutes, and this query would bring me would simply bring me using keywords and using keywords and using source category. Excellent. Sounds like the phone sounds a lot better now. Great. So, by the way, these are some of the simple labs that I'm just skipping for you because hopefully this should be a review for you. But then if you haven't used that, metadata and keywords, lab number 1 will walk you through how to use some of those. It's pretty straightforward for you to try out. All right, the other thing that you should know about is Livetail. Livetail, as the name suggests, let me show you here, allows you to tail your logs. So I can open a Livetail session like so and do this. And this is tailing all the logs across all my web servers that are using Lab Apache Access as their source category. So if I'm a developer, this is fantastic. I no longer depend on the production team to give me access to each one of the boxes, but instead I can go through Sumo's UI and I can grab all these logs. By the way, there's also a command line interface that you can use that will allow you to run this from the command line as well. And you could do things like highlight all 404s, perhaps highlight the word error, perhaps highlight the word Mozilla, and you get the point, right? Here is my, here it is. And of course, you can scroll up, you can scroll down, you can jump to the bottom, you can do this as you're going through here. Okay, so that's Livetail. Again, hopefully this should be a review for you. Use metadata, use keywords, and you have the ability to use Livetail as well. Let's talk a little bit about parsing, because this is where it really starts making sense. You're providing structure to your data by parsing these messages. So what does that mean? Well, let me show you what it means. So see this message. Let me make my screen a little bit bigger so you guys can see it. Here is the message itself, right? Here is the, this that I'm highlighting there is the Apache Access message. And you see that it's gotten an IP address, it's gotten a date, a method, a URL, a status code. It's got a lot of information in it. And some of that information gets parsed automatically. For example, the date stamp gets parsed automatically, and we have a timestamp over here. But what if I wanted to parse out the status code, for example, 200 here, and there's another 200 over there, but I bet you that somewhere along the lines, I might have a 304 or a 404, and I want to start finding out counts for all these. How many 302s do I have? How many 404s? So what you can do is you can start parsing your message. And let me show you one simple example of doing that, and then I'm going to talk about a few others. One of the ways that you can do it is you can highlight what you want to parse. And what it allows you to do is it says parse selected text. This allows you to use this message as an example to parse things. So I can say anything that you find between the word get and the word HTTP, I'm going to extract that, and I'm going to call that the URL. And now anything that you find out afterwards, extract that, and that's going to be my status code. And what you see me do is I'm literally just using this message as an example so that I can extract things out of it. I'm going to call this the refer. And just the last one, I'm going to grab all this stuff all the way to the end in quotes, extract that, and that's going to be my user agent. So what you notice is I just basically gave this some variable names. I said, find this pattern that is up here. And when you find that pattern, oops, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Let me do it again. I accidentally got out of that screen. I'm just going to do it again pretty quickly, which is good. This is a review for you. So anything in between here and here, extract that. That's my URL. Anything after that, I'm going to extract it. And the one after, I'm going to extract it. So that's going to be my my status code and my size. And then I'm going to grab this kind of stuff here, and that's going to be my refer. And the last one I'm going to grab here is all this other stuff, which I could parse further, but just to keep it simple for now, I'm going to call that the user agent. And if I click on submit now, what it does is it just builds that parsing statement for me. I could have typed it if I wanted to, but it's just a lot easier to build it this way, right? So if you notice, now I'm saying parse, go find this pattern in here. And if you find it, extract this field and call it URL, and extract this field and call it status code. And you get the point. And let's run that query now. And what you'll see is that those fields have been parsed out for me. Let me scroll here to the right, and you see the message is still here. But I've extracted from this message the user agent, I've extracted the URL, the status code, the size, the referrer, and now I can do stuff like this. I can say count by status code. And look at this. It now lets me get a count of status codes in here, which is great. Now I really can see what's going on with my environment. Or I could really say I only want those messages where status code equals 404. Because status code is now a field, those messages are getting parsed, and I really only have those messages that have a status code of 404. So parsing your messages is very, very, very important because you can start giving your data structure and you can use that data. Now, I showed you one method of parsing. There's quite a few different methods, and let me just pull up documentation to show you a few others. I'm going to go to that Home tab, and under Learn, one of the things available to me is the documentation, the docs themselves. And I'm going to go up in here and just search for parse operators. And let me pull that up for you, make this a little bit bigger. All right, so the one that I just showed you right now is called parse using Anchor. And the reason for that is because Apache Access has very predictable patterns. It's very easy to parse Apache because the messages always looks the same. But what if my messages look different? What if I had variable patterns like this? In that case, I can use regex. So let me just give you an example. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go and grab the message and show you. For those, I'm assuming most of you have used regex before, but in case you haven't, I'm going to grab this and just walk you through exactly what it's doing. I'm going to go back to my query. Where was my query? It was right here. I'm going to add this field in here, this thing that I just copied, and run it. And what I'm showing you here that it's doing is it runs this parse statement, then it runs this second parse statement, and this second parse statement is saying, listen, go find this pattern which says a digit from a number from 1 to 3 digits followed by a period, and then a number followed by 1 to 3 digits in a period, 1 to 3 digits in a period. And that sounds pretty much like an IP address, right? So it says, go find that pattern. And if you find it, store it in a field called IP address. And if I run that query now, look what happens. It also parses out the IP address. And now I can do stuff like, let's see, average size by IP address. So now I can get the average size of each message broken by IP address. Not all that meaningful, but what I wanted to show you is the fact that I can have multiple parse statements, and I can have, and those fields that are the results of those parse statements can be used for any analytics that I want to do out there. All right, just to round this up, excuse me, I just want to show you that there are quite a few other options in here. We have JSON. If you're sending us JSON formatted logs, guess what? We have an operator called JSON operator. If you're sending us key value formatted logs, we have key value. We have an operator called key value. CSV. If you're using something else like a tab or a colon or XML, we have the ability to parse those. Just to show you the JSON one at least. Excuse me. Let me show you here. I'm going to open a new search. And I'm going to search for, let's say that I have, what CloudTrail data. Let's look for labs, AWS, CloudTrail. I know that this is JSON formatted logs. And if we look at them, hopefully they are. Yeah, there you go. So look at this logs. These are JSON formatted. So I could do something like, let's say that I wanted to parse out event name here. I can just say JSON, which is the operator, and then specify the field that I want to parse out. So this is going to parse out event name. And that field is now parsed out. Look at this. It's been parsed out for me. And what I can do now is I can do things like count by event name. Because event name is now a field, I can do any analytics that I want on that. And I can see which event name is happening the most. Pretty straightforward, right? Let me get rid of this last line for a second just to show you something. So when I parsed event name, not only did it parse it out here, it is showing it here in some display fields. By the way, source name, source host, source category, those are the fields that we already knew about. but it's showing me event name as one of the parse fields. Let me show you something pretty cool about the JSON operator. I can also do JSON auto. Why is that? Well, we all know what JSON looks like. So Sumo Logic traverses the entire JSON tree and just parses everything out for you. So check it out. It went through this massive tree and it parsed everything on that message, regardless of how many levels you have. It just went through all of those levels and it parsed them out. So how do you know that it parsed them? Because if you go down here, look at this. There's all the fields that it parsed out for us out of that message, out of that JSON auto. So if I wanted to use AWS region, I could do that now. I could say count by AWS region, and I should be able to do a count. Oh, there's a region. It's not an interesting one in there, but you get the point. That is a field that now exists, and now I can use it. So for example, I could do count by error message, right? So count by error message, because error message is now a field that has been parsed out of that, and I can see what are the error messages that show up in my environment right there, right? And the ones that show the most, in this case, I have this one that is showing up 54 times. All right, so I've shown you a couple of good examples in here of how you can start parsing. It's very, very, very important that you parse your data, because that's what gives it structure. But now the question that I normally get around here is, oh, this is great that I'm parsing, but I don't want to be having to parse every single time I'm using the Apache Access data. And the good news is that you don't have to. You can create what we call field extraction rules. Hopefully, most of you have already created them, but just in case you haven't, let me just show you. A field extraction rule, let me go to Manage Data, Settings, and here under Field Extraction Rules, fortunately, there's a few already created for me. Let's look at this one that's already been created. I'm going to go in here and edit it so that you can see how it was built. What this is saying is, the field is called my Apache Field Extraction Rule, and it's saying, listen, any message that comes into Sumo that matches source category equals something Apache Access. So this could be Labs Apache Access, Dev Apache Access, Prod Apache Access. I don't care. If it has a source category of something Apache Access, I want you to apply the following rule to it. So it goes ahead and it parses out all this data as the messages are getting ingested. So this is fantastic because messages are getting ingested and indexed. They're getting parsed and indexed as well. So that makes my queries a lot easier. Let me show you now what my query would look like if I have a field extraction rule. Since there is already a field extraction rule parsing stuff for this, I can get away with this. Look, I'm going to simplify my query, and I can do this. Why can I do that? Because size and IP address are already fields that exist. And how do I know? Maybe it's called something else. I'm going to find out if it's called IP address or something else. The reason that I know that is because if I run the query just looking for Labs Apache Access, look at all these fields that are in here. Remember this field browser I was showing you before? All these fields, it's called source IP. Let me just go fix it here. It's called source IP. The reason why those fields show up is because there is a field extraction rule in place that allows me to do exactly this. So now my messages are so much easier because I can use this field extraction rule to parse stuff out. All right. So with that said, pretty straightforward. Create your field extraction rules. Make sure that you put them in place. I'm going to skip some of these labs because hopefully this should be a review for you. I will show you a couple ones. I will show you the no drop and the parse field so you can see a little bit of this kind of stuff as well. So let me go and open lab number 3 here. Skip down to, I showed you JSON Auto just earlier. Let me show you this no drop option. This is an interesting one. I'm going to cheat. I'm just going to grab the results of what you will be playing with when you try these out. I'm going to open a new query, and I'm going to put these here. So let me comment some of the fields out first. I'm looking at Lab Apache error. And if you notice, Lab Apache error, look at this line number 1. This one has one format. It says error, client, some IP address, and then some kind of a message afterwards. This second line is slightly different. It says error, and it doesn't have a client and an IP address. It has log SQL and then some sort of another message out there. So what if I wanted to parse both types of messages? Well, the way that you would do it is using a no drop. Let me show you what happens when you put the no drop option at the end of a parse statement. When you do that, what happens is it searches for this pattern, client something in between brackets. And when it finds it, like here, it found client something within brackets, it's going to extract the IP address as I expected. But if it does not find that pattern, like any of these other ones in here where it does not find the pattern, then for those, client IP is going to remain empty, right? And then what I can do is I can have a second parse statement saying, okay, so look for mod log SQL and grab whatever is, let's call this message. Let's call it new message. And parse that out and call it new message. And if I run that query now, what you'll notice is there are some fields where I'm going to parse out new message, and there's other fields where I'm going to parse client IP. I'm sorry, other messages where I'm going to find IP. So in this case, the no drop just allows you to not drop the messages because you're going to parse them with something else out there. Let me show you one more example, and this one's called the field operator for parsing. This is a good one as well. I'm going to go back to my query. Again, these are just labs that you're going to be playing with later on, but I want to walk you through some of these so that you can see how these work. So in this case, I'm looking at my GitHub data, right? This is my lab's GitHub data, and I'm looking for anything that has the word committer in it. So I'm looking for data for the committers in my GitHub data. And one of the things that I can find in here is their email address. If you notice, it says email : and then it parses out and there's an email address. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to parse out that. I'm going to say, search for the word email with a colon and grab anything after that and store it in a new field called email. If I run that query now, there you go. Here's my email that has been parsed out from those messages, right? But I can do further parsing from that. I can say, okay, now parse the field named email, and I want you to grab everything in front of the @ sign and store it under users, and everything after and store it under domain. And look at that. I can do additional parsing to a field that has already been parsed. And there you go. There's the domain, there is the users, and then I could even say something like, let's say where since domain is now a field, I'm going to say where domain matches sumologic.com. Let's say that I only cared for users that have sumologic.com info, so I can run that stuff. And now it's only looking at domain sumologic.com, and then I can say count by users, and I can even say just give me the top 5 users. And what I just ran a query for is my top 5 GitHub Sumo Logic committers in there, right? Just by running this kind of stuff. So what I just showed you is the fact that you can do additional parsing of fields that have already been parsed as well. All right, let's move on to other topics in here. Simple analytics. Again, hopefully this is a review for you. This is what the syntax of a query looks like. And what it is a bunch of keywords and operators separated by a pipe. So in this case, in this particular query, I'm looking for source category, Lab Apache Access, and the word Mozilla. Those messages, however many, let's say that you pulled 10,000 messages, those 10,000 messages get passed on to the next line, to the next operator. And this operator parses out those 10,000 messages, and then it gets sent on to the next line, which says, I only want those where status code equals matches 5x or 5 something, 5 star. So that means that now maybe I only have 2,000 messages. So then those 2,000 messages get counted by status code, and then those get sorted, and eventually we just show the top 3, right? So you now see how we can select what we want and then do parsing, then filtering, then aggregation, and then eventually some sort of formatting for those messages themselves. That's what the query syntax looks like. there's some simple analytics. The usual suspects are out there, right? Oops, sorry. The count, the sum, the average, the min, the max, the if statements, matches. So all these are the usual ones. Hopefully, I won't spend too much. Yeah, I won't spend too much time on these because you hopefully know most of these. But like I said, there are labs in here for you to be able to try some of these. Let's grab one of these actually. Let's do the. Let me go to here. Oops, sorry about that. Let's go to the labs themselves, and you notice again this is some conditional operators. Let's do this one. How about this one in here? I'll just walk you through it. Again, I think the best part of all this is for you to try the labs. That's where you will really get the sense of how this works. So look at this one. This is saying source category goes lab Apache access. Parse out the status code. Actually, we could even get rid of this parse statement, right? Because we have a field extraction rule in place. So we don't even have to parse it. We have status code as a field already. So we can say if status code matches 4x, 4 star, then create a new field called client error that has a 1 or a 0, depending on whether it matches. And let's actually run that query like that. And the same thing happens here. If status code matches 5 star, then create a new field called server error that has a 1 or a 0. So let's run that query now. Let's see what it looks like. There it is. Here's my message. And here's the new fields. There's the status code. And here's the new fields that I created, server and client error. And if you notice, they're usually errors. I mean, here we go. Here's one that is a 404. Therefore, client error is set to 1. There was another one. Well, you get the point. It basically goes through it. And if it matches 400, client error is set to 1. And if it matches 500, server error is set to 1. So now what I do here at the end is I can say, okay, now sum up all the server errors as my server error count, and sum up all my client errors as client error counts. Remember, these were a whole bunch of 1s and 0s. So by doing a sum, essentially what I'm doing is I'm summing up all the 1s, and that gives me my count of server errors versus my count of client errors in my environment. Pretty straightforward, right? Good. All right, let's take a peek at another one here. I'm going to let you try some of these. Let's try this one. How about, you've seen those fancy maps that we put out there showing you information. Let's plot one of those. Let's open a new log search here, and we'll run this one. What this one is doing is it parses that client IP, and then it's using this lookup operator. And this lookup operator allows you to bring in geolocation information. So in this case, I'm pulling latitude, I'm pulling longitude from this geolocation. Geolocation is the free service we offer. This is available to everyone that is using Sumo Logic already. And in this case, I'm using the IP address to be able to identify. So I parse the IP address, and then I feed it to this lookup, and I say, bring back latitude and longitude. Then I count by latitude and longitude, and what I get is a list of a count of all the messages that have the same latitude and longitude. And now I can map that. I can click on this, and voila, there you go. Here is my map showing me a count of latitude and longitude for each one of those. So usually the questions that I get around here is, okay, so if you get latitude and longitude, what other fields are available to you? What I would do is I would point you to documentation and just say, well, in this case, we can make it even easier and say geo lookup. This is the lookup that I just ran. And if you look at this here, here's everything that you can get. You can get continent, country code, name, region, city, state, and so on. And here's an example of how to do that. As a matter of fact, I'm just going to cheat and grab that example. So latitude, longitude, I'm going to grab all these other ones here. Oops, postal code, copy, go back to my query, and I'm going to say latitude, longitude, country code, and all that other stuff, and then I'm going to count by those. So I run that same query, I look at the table results, and there you go. There's all those other fields. And if I really only wanted those where country code equals Canada, I can do it. I can just put a simple where clause, and I can say where country code equals CA. And it's as easy as that. There you go. Great, 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 great. So this is pretty straightforward. This is just an easy way for you to start seeing some of the new operators that are out there, an easy way for you to map where your locations are coming from. Let's move on to the more interesting stuff, the advanced analytics. So hopefully most of the stuff we just saw was a review. Let's talk a little bit about the advanced analytics. I want to show you a few in particular. Outlier. This is an incredibly helpful one. So let me show it to you rather than just typing it. Let me show it to you here. And I'm going to cheat a little bit because I already have a few of these set up. So I'm just going to go grab them and open them so that I don't have to type them. Okay, look at this one. This is a cool one I want to show you. What this is doing is it's saying, listen, pull up all my Live Apache Access messages that have a status code of 404. By the way, I can do this because there's a field extraction rule. So status 404 is already a field that exists, which is fantastic, right? Then I'm going to use the time slice operator. Hopefully you saw this in level 1 certification. What this allows me to do is it allows me to look at trends over time. So these 60 minutes that you see here are going to get sliced into 1-minute buckets. I could have said 5-minute buckets if I wanted to, but let's keep it into 1-minute buckets. And then I'm going to do something. I'm going to count all the messages that I have as server error count by time slice. So let's run that first and just show you what that looks like. When I run that, I basically get every time slice and the number of error counts that I have during that time, right? And if I were to plot this on a line, it looks something like this. This is just showing me the number of 404s that I get over time. Pretty straightforward, right? Okay, but now what I want to show you is this outlier operator. Check this out. I'm going to run this outlier operator. Let me run it first, and then I'm going to walk you through what it just did and all that stuff in there. What it's doing is it is showing me not only my count, which is shown by the line, but it's showing me a threshold. And then in pink, with pink triangles, it's pointing out those cases where my count is outside of that threshold or outside of that standard deviation. So how many standard deviations? I can decide how many using this threshold. If I want 3 standard deviations, I can set that threshold to 3. And now you see that there are less things outside of that, outside of the standard deviation. If I want to change directions, right now I'm saying anything above and below, but let's say that I only want those above, I can change that direction. And now I'm really only looking at the things that are outside of that standard deviation that are above the threshold. Consecutive, that means how many pink triangles do I have to have consecutively before I alert you that there is a violation on that kind of stuff, right? So let me change this threshold to 1. You will notice that now I have many more violations that are out there. If I change this consecutive to 2, what's going to happen is for those violations that only happen once in here, it's not going to alert me. But whenever I have at least 2 or more consecutive violations, then it's going to alert me with a little pink triangle. Let's change this to 5. That means I must have, oh, that might be too much. Let's change it to 4. I must have 4 consecutive violations before it alerts me. Actually, I don't have enough. Let's change to 3. So in this case, there we go. 1, 2, and 3. It's alerting me that I had 3 violations, and therefore that thing shows up there. And the last thing that I have here is window. What window allows me to do is it allows me, so as most of you know, in order to figure out the standard deviation, what I do is I look at historical data. Let's just change this. This looks awful. Let's change this to a 3. All right. So what this does is, in order to identify what the standard deviation should be at this data point here, it looks at historical data. And according to historical data, it decides what the standard deviation should be now. So how much historical data should I look at? That's what this window is all about. If I say 10, for example, that means it's going to look at the previous 10 data points to decide what the standard deviation should be now. So the default, I believe, is 5. It's going to look at 5 data points to identify what the standard deviation should be now. So this is just a fantastic, fantastic query. Outlier is a fantastic operator, I should say, for alerts. In our case, we would set up an alert on this little triangle in here. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit since you've already seen alerts in the past. So just to show you how I would make an alert out of this. So this little pink triangle, fortunately, corresponds, if I look at the table view of the same data, that little pink triangle corresponds to a 1 here under violation. See, server error count violation is set to 1. So notice I only have 1 of those. That's that pink triangle. So in reality, what I could do is the following. I could say, let me just go here and add a where clause. If I add that where clause, that means that I will only get results in this query if I have a server error count that is not 0, that is greater to 0, right? That it's set to 1. So if I get no results, I shouldn't get alerted. But if I get results, then that means that I have a violation. So in that case, what I can do is, most of you already probably know how to do a scheduled search from level 1. Well, you save the search, and part of saving that search allows you to schedule it. Just click on this schedule the search. You specify when you want that to run. We're going to say on an hourly basis in this example. You choose the time frame that you want that to run. And then here, in terms of send notification, you can say, I want that notification to be sent every time, which is probably not that meaningful. But more important would be if the following condition is met. So I can say, if the following condition is met, I know that if the number of results is 0, I should not get a message. But if my number of results is greater than 0, that means that there is a violation because there is a 1, and therefore I should receive an alert for that kind of stuff. So I can go in here, choose my alert type, choose who the recipients should be, specify the subject for my alert, and specify what I want to include on that alert as well. All right. So again, Outlier is just an incredibly great operator to help you with alerting of critical events that are happening out there. Let's talk about another one. I want to show you Predict. Predict is pretty straightforward, but also a good operator. Predict allows you to, as the name suggests, look at what's happening, look at the forecast, predict what might be happening in the future. Let me show you the line of this kind of stuff. So the light blue line you see here are my actual data points. And then the straight blue line, or the one that is trending up slightly, that's my predictions. So in this case, what I requested is I requested 10 data points of 5 minutes each, so 50 minutes worth of predictions, or I could have done 12, so I can look at an hour's worth of prediction of what's really happening going forward with my data. In this case, I'm looking at requests. So this can help me, for example, if I see that the number of requests at the beginning of the day is trending upwards, that could help me figure out what I need to do in terms of horsepower to be able to manage the requests that I'm going to have throughout the day. All right. Let me close this one for now. Okay, I want to show you a couple more. I want to show you 2 more operators, one called LogReduce and one called LogCompare. Again, for all this stuff that I'm showing you, there are labs, so I would highly recommend that you try the labs, because that's what really gives you the knowledge so that you can try some of that stuff. But let me show you this one, LogReduce, which I showed you on the demo, but let me talk a little bit more about it. So let me close some of these here so that we can make this a little easier for you to see. All right, so I'm going to open a new log search, and in this case, I'm going to look for some of my snort data. And since I don't know exactly what that data, what the source category is, I'm going to say star snort star. So anything that has the word snort in it. All right, There it is. So it's actually Labs Security Snort for future reference. But what I see here is some of you might recognize Snort data. Snort data is my network intrusion detection data. I'm sorry. And so as a security engineer, I might be interested in finding out what are the new things that are out there? What are the new attacks that I'm getting? For example, if I know that I have an attack called Trojan, I can search for the word Trojan, and I will get every single message that has the word Trojan in it, right? Let's look for more data. How about the last 60 minutes? But if I know that I'm looking for a leak, I can look for the word leak, data leak, and I will get any message that is out there. But if I really don't know what I'm looking for, if I really just want to find out what's out there, give me a second. If I really want to know what really is out there, I can do one of these things. I can click the word LogReduce here, and what it's going to do is it's going to take this 6,000 messages, and it's going to start breaking them into signatures. So what that does for me is it lets me see what are those things that are happening a lot and what are those things that are happening very little. The ones that are happening a lot, I probably already know about them. There's the leak I was talking before, some classification, some network detection of a network scan. So these things are happening a lot and maybe I already knew about them. But what about those things that are not happening that often? Oh, look at this one. This one is saying, this one only happened twice, and it's saying that there's an attempted denial of service. So this is probably something new for me. And I could even click on that little number 2, and I can go find out a little more about those messages. So in this case, here are the messages, right? I can see that it happened today around, this is in UTC time, but this is showing me when that happened. And I could take it even a step further. So this is the message that I'm concerned about. I can say, listen, I want to find out more information about it. I want to see the surrounding messages. I want to see 1 minute before and 1 minute after so that I can get the context of what was going on with my messages here. So there you go. What's happening right now is I now took a message that was important to me, and I'm now looking at 1 minute before and 1 minute after for that message to really understand what was going on right before it. So here's my message still, and I can see the messages that were happening before. So you notice that it's at page 1765 out of 3,500. That's about halfway, because there's about half of the messages that happened before and half of the messages after. So now I can backtrack and look at what else was going on right before that message happened. All right. Cool. I see no questions, so I'm going to assume you guys have no questions on what I'm going through, or you're waiting for the end. But if you have any questions, by all means, feel free to bring them up. All right. So that's what LogReduce is all about. Let me talk about another one that is pretty cool. Right next to LogReduce is this one called LogCompare. And what LogCompare does is it runs a LogReduce now to identify signatures, and it runs a LogReduce 24 hours ago to compare signatures as well. And then it comes back and it says, okay, Mario, look at this. This message that is here happened 3,000 times now, and that's about 4.7% less than it was happening 24 hours ago. Here, let's look at another one that might be interesting. Oh, look at this one. This is interesting. This one here, attempted information leak. This happened 38 times this time around, and that's a 93% increase of how much we saw this activity 24 hours ago, right? By the way, LogReduce, LogCompare, I'm sorry, uses a default of 24 hours, but you can choose 7 days. You can choose custom. I just use the default. This one here is interesting. Look at this one. This one is saying, here you have a here you have 2 messages that were not happening at all 24 hours ago. They weren't happening, and now they're brand spanking new. You see them just in this hour. So you as a network engineer now have a good sense of, I have to go and take a look at this now. And then here are a couple of other ones that used to show up before and now are completely gone. So this might be attacks that you've actually mitigated, attacks that you've taken care of, and now they're completely gone because nobody can successfully gain privilege, administrator privilege access to your environment, right? These were attacks you saw 24 hours ago, but you don't see anymore. All right, so I've shown you LogReduce and LogCompare in the context of security, but you can also imagine how you can use this LogCompare. For example, something very familiar for developers is, or for operations people is, it was working before, it's not working now. What has changed? What has changed from one environment to the other? And so therefore, you can run a LogCompare of your logs now with a LogCompare of your logs, I don't know, 7 days ago. And that is going to give you the difference of what was there before and what was there now, and what has changed, right? Good, good, good. So again, this should give you a good sense for that kind of stuff. When we run these face-to-face, this is where we pause, we let people try some of the labs, try some of the advanced analytics stuff. Again, I'm going to leave it to you guys to try some of these in your time. And by the way, for those of you who do want to get certified, which is, I hope is all of you, the labs are what really prepare you for that kind of stuff. It's pretty straightforward. I talked a little bit about metrics in our initial demo. So in terms of analyzing metrics, there are 4 sources. I only list 3 here because one of them just became available, but there are 4 sources where we can get metrics from. We can get metrics from your host servers. So your host servers can send us things like CPU and memory and network and all that kind of stuff. We can also get AWS metrics. So AWS happens to send all its metric information into their CloudWatch, So we can actually tap right into CloudWatch and grab all AWS metrics. You can also send us your Graphite compatible metrics. So if you're using something like CollectD or StatsD or DropWizard, we can grab metrics from there as well. And the 4th one, which isn't listed there, is we can actually create metrics out of your logs. So if you have logs that have data in them, we can actually create metrics out of those as well. And the good news is that we actually have apps. In level 1, we talked a lot about apps. I haven't too much today, but I hope that all of you are aware that we have these apps, this out-of-the-box content that you can start using. So just to make sure that everybody is aware, let me go in here and show you that you have something called the app catalog. And the app catalog has a lot of apps that we've put together, giving you information, readily available information for your stuff. So let's say that you wanted to, that you just brought in your, I don't know, RDS data. Well, you can get your RDS metrics by installing this app. Or let me show you. We were playing with Apache Access data. Let's install the Apache app so that you can see what kind of data is available. So I'm going to click on this. I'm going to add to library, and I'm going to call it Apache Mario. And my source category means how do I identify my my Apache data? As you guys remember, it's lab Apache access. So all I'm telling it is, how do I identify your lab Apache access data so I can bring it into these dashboards? I'm going to click on add to library. And what it's doing right now in the background for me is it's installing all these dashboards. It's installing all these queries that have analytics for Apache access. And look at this. It installed this Apache overview dashboard. Again, I didn't create anything. It literally grabbed my data and sent it into this dashboards. And now I can see things like visitor locations, traffic distribution by server, traffic volume, response over time. Let's go look at what else it did for me. Sorry, it was in here. Web server operations. Let's look at that one. Look at this. It's showing me the top 10 bots, client locations, server errors over time, and you get the point. There's all these analytics that are out of the box that you don't even have to build much stuff. You know what is even better about this is that you can take any of these and you can tweak it to your needs. So here is top right-hand side. Here's this one called server errors over time, and it's showing me my 500s. What if I wanted client errors over time? Well, it's pretty simple. I can edit this query. I can go in here. Hopefully, for you guys, you already know a lot of this stuff, right? So instead of looking for 500s, what I'm going to look is for 400s, and I'm going to run this query here. And as you will see in a second, there you go. Here is my query now showing me my 400s over time instead of my 500s over time. It was as simple as that. I'm going to even simplify this because I have a field extraction rule. Therefore, all this parsing is not needed. And what you're seeing is a much a simplified version, or an edited version, I should say. I was looking at client at server errors over time. I'm looking at client errors over time this time, but with a simplified view or with a simplified query, because I have my field extraction rules in place. And if this is something that I like, I can save it, I can store it, and all that good stuff. All right. Let me show you one other thing, which is pretty cool about this. Not necessarily an operator, but something that is going to be very useful for you. Let's say that I wanted to do just 404s. I'm gonna tweak this for now. 404. All right. Where status code equals. I forgot the equal sign. There we go. So I can create a query like this that it's pretty easy. But let's say that other people will want to run this query, but they're not all that technical. They really don't like this language here would probably scare them. So how can we create a simple query so that they can just specify what the status code is and they can run that query? So what we can do is we can create a search template. And to do that, what you do is you highlight whatever you want that variable to be. And you notice that when you highlight it, notice here, when you highlight it, you get this little prompt here, create a parameter. If you click on that, you get this little thing, and I'm going to call it status code. And the default value is going to be 404. The data type is a string or whatever you want it to be. You can specify a description, enter the relevant status code, right? And then you can even set values if you want to, right? You can choose, you can specify text entries, like I can say 404 and 500 and 200 and 302, and you get the point, right? And I'm going to make some up. Okay, and click on save. So now what happens is this is what they would get to see. Let me hide this. If you save it and share it, this is what you're sharing. So someone could come in here and just say, I want only 501s. Run that query, and they would get the results necessary in there. Oops, I don't have any 501s. Or you can also have them choose from the drop-down list. So they would choose 302, and then this query would run for those 302 messages in there. So just a way of creating a search template by creating parameters, right? So how do you go about doing this? You follow those steps, and then you save that query, or you also want to share it. And to share it, you have the URL that is specified in here that you can share with other people so they can use this as well. All right. I've been giving you quite a lot of information on how to do a lot of these things. I just switched over to metrics. We talked a little bit about logs and metrics and the ability to do overlay. So if you remember, when I was showing you the demo, you had your metrics plot, and you had your logs that were overlaying right above as well to show that. Again, I'm going to let you try some of the labs themselves. The labs will walk you through how to do a lot of that stuff. When it comes to monitoring your data, pretty straightforward. You now all should know how to create a dashboard. It's pretty straightforward. As a matter of fact, I'm going to create a very quick dashboard. But what I really want to get to is I want to get to creating some meaningful alerts, because that's I think it's a little more valuable for you. But let's create a simple dashboard. I'm gonna go here, close some of this stuff that is open. Let's just create our first dashboard. As a matter of fact, I'm going to use this query here to create our first dashboard. Remember this outlier that I had built before? So what if I wanted to add this to a dashboard? It's as simple as clicking Add to Dashboard. I give it a panel name, so I could change that if I wanted to. I would specify what my dashboard is called. I'm going to make it simple right now and just create a new dashboard called Mario Dash. Put it in my personal folder and click on Add to Mario. And there you go. Here is my first dashboard. Pretty simple, nothing major to it, but a dashboard nonetheless. If I want to add more panels to this, what you want to do is go to the query that you're looking for, and then for that query, you would go and build a dashboard. So let's say that we had this query in here. I can say, oh, look at this one. This one has two options in here. The first one says update dashboard. Why is that? Because this came from a dashboard. You remember this is a query that I stole from the existing dashboard. So if I wanted to update that dashboard with this new query, I would click update dashboard. So Sumo's smart enough to know that this query came from a dashboard. Or if I wanted to add it to a whole new dashboard, I can just say add to dashboard, and then I would specify which dashboard I want to add it to. In this case, I'm going to add it to my Mario Dash. Click on add. And as you would expect, it's just going to go and add it somewhere in there as a query as well. You could do a couple of things here. You can toggle the theme. You can add some text panels and some title panels and all that good stuff in here. Your data. And it's pretty straightforward. So this is in here, your information. This is in Spanish, by the way. That's why you don't understand. I'm joking. And then I can add links to other messages as well. Those ones are not in Spanish, so you should be able to understand them. But there you go. As simple as that, I was able to create my first dashboard, and it took me less than 5 minutes to build it. And you can move stuff around, you can switch it. The important thing I want to talk about here is sharing. As often as you can, all the content that you create, you want to share it because you don't want people to start from scratch. So in this case, I can share it with everybody in my organization, and I can decide whether they have view access or edit access or even manage access to that kind of stuff. And if you want to choose another person, for example, in here, I can say that someone named Josh is going to have manage access to it. So in this case, I'm granting view access to my organization, but I'm granting manage access to everybody else. You can also see who has access to it. In this case, since I haven't said share, it's only me who has access to it. And then the last thing that I want to show down here under shareable URL is the fact that there is a URL that you can share with people. So you can just send them that link and they should be able to come into it. You can even say, if I apply filters, I want to share it with the filters applied. If I change the time range, I want to share with the time range applied. But there's one more thing that I wanted to point out. You can make this dashboard visible outside of your org. That means people who do not have a login to Sumo could go and log into that. And some of the options are world, which means anybody who gets that URL would see it. Probably a little bit dangerous. More intelligent would be to whitelist. You can specify a list of IP addresses that have access to be able to want to see that URL. All right. So sharing is caring. Whenever you can, go ahead and share your content in there. All right, we have about 10 minutes, and I want to show you one last thing in here. Let me close a few of these. I want to talk a little bit about alerts, because alerts are pretty helpful, but they could very quickly become noise. So what I want to do is I want to talk briefly. Let's see. Let me just go see if I've got them here. Let me open 3 different alerts and talk about how one is better than the other. So here is here's a very simple alert. I'm saying send me my Live Apache data that has status code 404. So I want to alert whenever I have more than 100 404s on a given minute. Right? So I run this query, and if I have a count that is greater than 100, there you go, like in this case. And if I have results, I should alert people of that. Or maybe I want to do it more interesting. What about 160? So if I ever have anything above 160, let's do it more interesting, 180. So you notice how I had to sort of calculate it manually. So this is a static threshold. If I ever have anything above 180, I want to save this thing. I want to schedule it. And you know the drill, right? You would schedule this. You would say, I want to run this on an hourly basis. I want to only send me an alert if the number of results is greater than 0, right? Because if the result is 0, that means that there's nothing greater than 180. If the result is more than 0, that means that I should be alerted that something is going on, right? So that's what that one there does. Pretty straightforward. Okay, not all that interesting because it's using a static threshold. Let me show you a better alert. A better alert is the one that we were looking at before, using outlier. In this case, outlier looks at the previous history, and using that history, it creates this, it looks at the thresholds, and if there's any pink triangles in here, they would be shown in my violation, in my count violation. So I can put this little query that says where count violation is 0. And like it is shown here, if I have no results, then that means I should not get an alert. So I could go through the steps again, save it, schedule the search, run every hour, or however I want it to run, and then say if the results are greater than 0, alert me, otherwise don't alert me. That's pretty straightforward. You guys remember that, right? Let me show you the best alert, the more meaningful alert. And that one does one extra thing or a couple extra things. Instead of just looking at your 404s, what you really want to do is you want to look at your 404s in the context of all your traffic. So in this case, I'm looking at my 200s as well. And then I can have, remember those if statements that I had before? If status code matches 200, then create a new field called success, create a new one called fails. Yeah, let's comment these out so I can walk you through this. So what we did just now is we created 2 new fields, one called successes, one called fails. There you go, fails and successes. That has a 1 and 0, depending on whether the status code is 200 or the status code is 404. And then I can do a sum. I can say sum my successes into a new field called sum success count, and sum my fails into a new field called fail count. And I'm doing it by time slice. So for each time slice, as shown in here, for each time slice, it shows me the count of successes and the counts of fails all the way down. Now what I can do is I can say create a whole new field called failure rate that is a division of my fail counts by my success count. So I'm just doing the ratio. I'm just figuring out a new field called failure rate that calculates the ratio between those two. And if I run that, you'll see that I have a failure rate here. And what I can do now is I can put an outlier on the failure rate itself. So so what this does is if my success count increases, or if my fail count increases at a higher rate than my success count, then my failure rate is gonna be much bigger. So instead of doing an outlier just on the count, I'm gonna do an outlier on that rate. And I specify all the same other stuff. And if you look at this now, if you look at this query, oh, this looks pretty bad. Let's just go in here, change axes, and let's make this log. So if you look at this now, this one is a much, much better indicator. What that pink triangle there is showing me is a case where my status codes rose at a much higher level. My 404s rose at a much higher level than my general traffic did, which is really a better indication that that there is some issue, rather than my 404s increasing at the same time as my 200s, which might just be a matter of statistics. So again, I can do the same where clause and all that good stuff and schedule this thing. So this just allows you to build a much more meaningful alert. Now, the one thing I want to say to those of you is, I just showed you examples using Lab Apache Access and using status codes, but these same exact queries that I just showed you could work for your event codes in Windows. It could work for your error codes in your own custom logs. So these are just good templates that you can use and reuse for your environment with your particular data out there. All right. I know that I've shown you a lot. Again, these are labs that you should try, and I'm gonna highly recommend that you try these. There's a couple of use cases that we won't get to review today, but what I do want to point out is that all these use cases that are in here, and I'm gonna, by the way, I'll email you the recording of this session as well as the slides, but all these point to what we call our community. I'm gonna just show you here in a second. We have this community. And by the way, it is community.sumologic.com. I know it says support here, but it just switches to community.sumologic.com. If you don't know how to access it, you can actually get to it from your Learn tab here, Community. So if you go here under Community, oh, I have my blocker popped up, but that's okay. If you have your community here, you can see, in this case, how to create an alert on ratios or percentages. And this walks you through the different steps on how to do exactly that, right? Including explanation, including the queries that you can run for that kind of stuff. So community is definitely a good resource for all of you to try out there. All right, so with that said, where do we go from here? What I would say is, you know, sift through the Learning tab to see what kind of stuff is out there. Apologies for the background noise. Let me just close a couple of the windows here. Sift through the Learning tab to see what other things are available to you. In essence, you have the ability to open a support ticket. You can go to community. You can try documentation. But probably more important, or what I want to point you to next, is the fact that you have the ability to take this level 2 exam. My recommendation is try those labs. And by the way, how do I get to those labs? Pretty straightforward. You want to go to certification, and under certification, hands-on labs. That's going to open that document that I was talking about before. Remember that PDF that has all this information in here? Try those labs, because that's going to make it a lot meaningful for you. The exam itself is an online exam, 30 multiple choice questions. You have 60 minutes to complete it. You have 3 attempts to take it. Most people pass it on the first attempt. A few people need to do it on the second attempt. Nobody has ever ran out of attempts. So my guess is that you will pass it in the first or second attempt as you go through it. The one thing I will say is, if you try the labs in the training instance, remember to log out. Take the exam in your own instance. If you don't, then someone else is going to get credit for it. So just remember, if you happen to be in someone else's instance, let me see if I can go into my environment. If you happen to be, say, in the training instance, just make sure you go here and you sign out and sign into your own instance. Otherwise, you will not get credit for that exam that you have out there. So with that said, let me pause here for a second and post it out to the team. Are there any questions out there? And by the way, I'm going to stop the recording right now.